So now I'm super excited to dive into this panel. This panel is called Home Away from Home. And we're just going to dive into the whole topic of imposter syndrome. We're going to play around with that, talk about it, unpack it, beat it up, all those different things there to really just dive into that. Because all of us have some type of relationship with that word. And yeah, let's dive into that for a minute. And so with that, you can cue up the music. Yeah, I want to welcome my panel to the stage. So come on up. Yeah. Yeah, come on up, panel. My esteemed panel. There we go. There we go. All right, cool.
I think this
Thanks.
is my lucky chair.
It is.
Yeah.
It is your lucky
Don't
chair.
call on me first.
Don't call. Okay, I'll skip
It
you
goes-
for now.
I see that Morehouse man. All right.
Yes, we do have Morehouse in the house. Yeah.
Other Morehouse men in here?
Any Morehouse men?
Because all right, there we go. Because
Yep.
I'm going to let Dr. Thomas, I know I saw y'all now.
There we go.
There you go. There we go. All right, I'm going to let them know y'all here in the house.
There we go. There we go. All right. Yeah, so home away from home is how we're going to do it. And Janine knows my style with this, but I'm going to introduce everybody and then shoot them a quick question about who they are. And I'll start with you, Dave.
Yes.
Dave Moody, CEO of Moody Construction. Done a number of amazing things when it comes to the construction business, especially in the metro Atlanta area and beyond. But so that's who Dave, that's his role, what he does. But real quick, Dave, who is Dave Moody?
Dave Moody is a person who is just happy to be here and alive. I mean it. And even with all the challenges of life, I'm just thankful. I really am. And what I'm most proud about who I really am is a father, a husband of 42 years, and a grandfather. And that means more to me than anything else. The fact that my wife kept me for 42 years, my
you around.
children work in the business and actually like being with their daddy, and my grandkids have never heard the word no from their grandfather.
Good grandfather. All right, that is Dave. All right, so Cassandra, we'll move to you next. And so Cassandra Johnson, Vice President, Platforms and Devices here at Google. And Cassandra, who is Cassandra Johnson?
Okay, so since Mr. Moody did it one way, I'm just going to go a totally different way, since we just had this amazing affirmation speaker prior. So I'm Cassandra Johnson, and I'm a badass woman.
Okay.
That's
Okay.
all to it, who just happens to work in an amazing company with some amazing colleagues like Janine, and just enjoying life and really proud. I just sent a comms out to my team, having a front row seat of my son who's a junior in high school and seeing him go through his journey. And I think that's just one of the proudest moments you can have, is helping nurture others and so forth. And I'm also from the Atlanta area. I went to school here, not at the AU Center, but we knew a lot of people at the AU Center. I went to Georgia Tech. So just proud and honored to be here. So thank you again
Awesome.
for the invitation.
Thank you. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. And so we all know Janine, so you know.
Yeah, I
there
see
you
some
go.
familiar faces. So I answered this question earlier. A couple additional details I'll give is I'm a fiercely loyal human. It's all about loyalty and respect for me, and a couple of other things that are core values for me: optimism, but not just like, oh, I'm optimistic, just, not grounded. Optimism in terms of power, optimism to get back up, optimism to keep going, optimism to see better, want better, go for better. And so that's like number one. And I said respect. And number three is integrity.
Okay.
I want to be that person. You see me in my sweatsuit, my hair is not done, I have no makeup on, I'm at the supermarket, you see me, I don't see you, but you see me. You're like, oh, that's Janine. I still recognize her even though she don't know I'm looking. I want to be that person.
All right. Yeah. Thank you, Janine. Yeah. 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 All right. So imposter syndrome, and Dave, we're going to start with you on this one. We'll just start off with the word. I want to define, what imposter syndrome is, as well as what is not imposter syndrome. So, Dave, we'll start with you on that. What is and is not imposter syndrome from your experience?
That's a great question and something to talk about, because you know, I'm 68. I'll be 69 in May. So I grew up in the 60s. You got to think about when I was watching TV as a kid, I saw nobody black on TV other than Butlers or whatever. Then finally we got Julia, but she was a single mother as a nurse. And then we got Good Times and a couple other things. So I grew up in a time where I didn't see a lot of people who looked like me doing what I'm doing. So, and I grew up in a time where I was taught and trained, you got to be twice as good. And, you know, and I came to Morehouse in 1974. I came 50 years ago to Atlanta. And I remember Maynard Jackson had only been a mayor a year then. But Morehouse instilled in me that I could be whoever I want. But what I realized, even today, there were things that were put in me in the 60s that actually made me limit my dreams and what I thought I could do. And I'm also the first in many things. I've been the first president of our Rotary. I was the second for our Rotary clubs, for the Boy Scouts. I was first for the Associated General Contractors. So I'm often the first or one of the few. And I realize I carry an extra load sometime when I go in a room. I don't code switch, but I realize often I'm wondering, are they watching me? Am I saying these words right? You know, did I do this right? And I don't say it a lot, but I'm saying it to myself. And so often I leave things, I'm exhausted. Now, I'm not that now because I don't care. But, you know, like at 65, I went and got my ear pierced and everything.
There you go.
I don't care.
There you go.
Got my tattoo on my forearm.
Living life.
You know. But when I was coming along, you didn't think about that in professional life.
True.
So the imposter thing is what we allow to, okay? I allowed those negative thoughts to make me feel often I was less than, or they're judging me, or they're watching me. So the imposter syndrome is what we allow. If you walk in there like, I deserve to be here, then an imposter thing, you don't even got to worry about it. And I'm going to challenge each and every one of y'all to understand you are created to be incredible. What stops us is our mind and those negative thoughts, and I call it the trickster part of the brain that tells you what you can't do because you're not good enough or you're not tall enough, whatever it might be. You leave all that behind, because I'm telling you, every one of y'all in this room, you are made to be incredible if you will believe it and put the work in. And you're going to get knocked to your knees, but every one of us is stronger than we realize, I promise you.
Wow, yeah. What's that? Yeah. And then Janine, curious to get your thoughts as well on that.
So, you know, I think a lot of times, like when we hear the term imposter or imposter syndrome, we don't necessarily associate that with being a perfectionist or perfectionism. But, you know, I was looking into this because I'm like, what's really going on here, right? And it also, you might be, and I think I saw this with myself at a young age, someone who feels like you have to be perfect. And then when you don't meet that bar, whatever that bar seems or to be for you, then you're like, I'm not good enough. Nothing I do is good enough. And for me, I think that got planted. I mentioned this earlier that I'm one of 8. And I'm from Brooklyn, New York, and my mom just was like, hustler, queen hustler. She's gonna figure out how to make it work. And so she instilled that in all of us. And so what turned out to be is I worked hard in young grades, lower grades, and I was able to be the first in my family to graduate high school, to go to college, and to go into a professional career. And that just felt like such a responsibility. Like, I have to bring everybody along, not just like myself or my siblings or my mom, but my whole neighborhood. I feel like everything was riding on me. I gotta do this right. I can't fail. I gotta be strong, because if I get weak and I can't handle it, I can't keep going, then who else is gonna like then what are people gonna do? What are people gonna feel? And so earlier in my career, like the first 10 years, I definitely was carrying that. I definitely was like, oh no, I didn't do that presentation good enough. Oh no, I didn't do this good enough. Even though my family was always proud of me, they were always like, oh my goodness, Janine, they were giving me, and I would just nod, but it never felt right. And so in a professional setting back in the office, I was fighting that and not feeling like I was like worth it or able to do it. Later, as I was able to get some coaching and support from others, which we can talk about more, I realized that actually this imposter syndrome, I think it's not so much a syndrome with me. I think it's other people's syndrome that they're projecting onto me. The feelings they have about themselves or they might have about me that they want to ingrain into me. And then now I'm sitting here like, oh, I have a problem. I don't belong. I can't make it. And so when that hit for me, I just, like you said, like, oh no, every room I'm going in, I'm like, ha, 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 get ready, get ready. I'm excited to be there, to just be me in those spaces. And I belong because I'm human.
Yeah, that's powerful. I mean, Cassandra, we'll get you in the
Yeah, and I'll just add on to what both they have shared. I think my upbringing was kind of unique because I grew up in Alaska. And there was no, like, I think it was just part of how we were raised. It was like, just go for it. It wasn't go for it because you're female, go for it because you're black, go for it because whatever. It's just go for it, have fun. And I think it wasn't until I went into my first corporate job where I realized, wait a minute, people are looking at me differently because I am female or a person of color in an engineering field and so forth. And so to Janine's point, that's when I felt the burden. You knew it was a blessing, but then you felt the burden. But then I realized that, you know what, this is just not my burden to carry alone. And so this is when you have to really bring your village, but also bring those who may not understand and help them be educated or be aware of how they can help and how they can lean in and so forth. Because I remember talking to one of our allies, and he was the most amazing ally. But one of the things that I told him that was like so different from us was the fact that, you know what, he was an amazing ally 9 to 5. But then at 5 or whatever, he left, and then it was just him going into his, bubble or whatever the case may be. And I was like, you know what, Clay, guess what? After 5 o'clock, we're still in who we are. So it's almost like a game where I said, when they get tired, they can raise their hand and say, Coach, I want timeout. For us, we're in this game 24/7, and we have to be present. But I think part of the aspect, too, was realizing, to Janine's point, is I didn't have to be someone that they felt I needed to be. It was more, who am I comfortable being with, being at that time or at that moment? And I think that was kind of like my epiphany as I think became more aware, more mature, and more confident. Because I think for a lot of time, a lot of people who know me, I'm kind of like outspoken, like Janine and I have this over-the-top kind of personality. And a lot of times it was like, wait a minute, I got to act a certain way. But then and people are like, sorry, well, you're not authentic. But then I realized, putting it just into our day-to-day lives, I was like, look, I am being authentic. Because just like I wouldn't behave a certain way with my mom or grandparents than I would with my sorority sisters or girlfriends, that's the same as at work. Or I wouldn't talk the same way to our senior pastor as I would, one of our friends. Like and it's not that you're not being authentic. It's more you're being respectful and appreciative of the relationships you have. And I think that is where I moved from being, is this an imposter, but to more being truly who I am and who I'm comfortable being at that moment, at that time, and so forth.
Yeah, the many different elements of who we are. And so one big takeaway that I'm getting just from listening to all of you is that it's not necessarily a question about what is or is not imposter syndrome. It's more so about the voices that we're telling ourselves or the things that are just running through our minds as we navigate our day, our life, the different spaces that we're in, There's an old sports phrase, you know, the person who believes they can and the person who believes they cannot are both right. Which one are you? So it's a very similar thing that I'm thinking when it comes to that. Just the stories we tell ourselves are extremely critical. And so with that, I wanted to go ahead and...
But Larry,
go
one
ahead.
thing I
Yep.
just want to,
Yeah.
I also just want to acknowledge, though, that I don't think it's just strictly what we tell ourselves.
Okay.
There are external messages coming at us.
That's true. What
And
narratives?
we hear things from people, from media, you know, the end of that meeting, I don't know, I'm sure you all have had this happen. You do your presentation, the meeting's over, and everybody flocks over. Where did you go to school? And I'm like, wait, who else getting asked that question? Oh, you're surprised? You get the messages. These are not, so
Yeah.
That's true.
it comes
What
from
happens in
it
spaces-
comes from inside, but it also comes from outside.
Outside. Yeah. Yeah.
And I guess when I
Things
was
that
talking about
enforce, yeah. Go ahead.
the inside, once those things happen to you a couple of times, we end up making it more. That's so
It
because you
accelerates,
will, and
accelerates, yeah.
and it's funny. Sometimes I walk, and it doesn't happen as much now, but I would walk into a meeting, and they would go, "Where's Mr. Moody?" And I go, "I don't know. I'm looking. Where is he?" You know. Yeah, but it's true. And then especially y'all being in engineering, when I first got in construction, women didn't even exist. And they might be in the office, but on a job site, I mean, it's interesting how professions like construction, women have a really tough time. Like I tell my daughter, I said, look, you got to be hard in this because they're going to challenge you. They're going to push you. And it's just amazing that there are some professions where they're male dominated or whatever. And you'll be surprised. It's like in my I've been in business 37 years. And to this date, on big projects like we've done Mercedes-Benz and all kind of stuff that 400 million up to $1 billion, I've never seen a black lead on the project who's the project director. I'll see all the other positions. Now on our projects, the people are of color who are in the lead, but there's still places we don't crack that ceiling. So there's still work to be done.
Yeah, yeah. That's a great addition because, yeah, the environments that we're in, those things can influence and saturate or infiltrate our minds. Yeah, yeah. So now the next thing I wanted to dive into is just the whole topic of worth. Because you have to know your worth, know your worth, don't give your worth away, all those things like that. I wanted to unpack that idea. Like, how do you determine your wealth? If we kind of go along with that phrase, how do you determine your wealth? How do you increase your value? What are some things that can decrease your value? Things like that. And I'm even particularly curious about those times where, you believe your worth is here, but the people around you think your wealth is here. And so how do you navigate that gap? And so that's what I want to dive into there. So I guess the first thing is, how do you determine your worth? Know your worth, what does that mean to you? Anybody?
Y'all want to go first? Okay.
Yep.
I'm going to tell y'all a quick story because this is when I learned my worth. When I first met, and this is important because be careful about the people you say you can't stand because they might become your life partner. So my wife and I met at 16. We were 16 years old. And a buddy said, hey, man, I want you to meet this lady, this sister, come over to the, So I go to her house, and I'm kind of full of myself. I'm a quarterback, football team and stuff. And back in the 70s, this is 1972, I walked in the house and met her. I said, look, I'm number 12 in your program, but number 1 in your heart. And she
Got
ignored
some
me.
game.
She ignored me. And I said, if I ever see her again, it'd be too soon. Well, 3 years later, 19, I come back after my first year of college, and one of my teammates, I'm home in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and he's in Detroit, 40 miles apart. I said, hey, Kenny, I'm going to get us some dates for the weekend. So I was trying to talk to my wife's friend. So I called her. I said, get somebody for Kenny. She gets my wife. So I go get Kenny, and we're going out for the weekend. We're going to go out Friday and Saturday night. Now, you got to remember, I couldn't stand my wife 3 years ago. So we get in the car, and I'm with the lady I'm taking up in the front because I'm driving, and my wife and Kenny in the back. But after, we were kind of talking before we got in the car, and I started going, man, she's not as stuck up as I thought. Wait a minute. So the whole night, I'm figuring out how to keep them from making really that eye contact or kissing.
Playing defense.
But this,
playing
look, it's my turf. So the next day, see, folks, this was before Google. We had to think. I couldn't Google how to get rid of it. So we spend the whole night, I sit between them at the concert. Yeah, but I'm playing it off smooth, though. They don't know what's happening. So the next morning, I made sure they didn't kiss or anything. I made sure, I said, because if he kissed, then, bets off. Next morning, we wake up, and I go, Kenny, I said, you know how dads are. He said, man, I'm not doing my chores. I need to take you back to Detroit. I said, we ain't going to be able to go out tonight with them. So I took him back. I came back, called my wife to be, that I didn't know would be my wife. I said, look, Kenny had to go back to Detroit. True story. My wife will tell you this story. I said, I'll take you out. 7 years later, we got married. The reason I tell you that story, I knew my worth. I knew I was worthy of her. And she has been with me for 42 years. We got married 7 years later after that, got rid of Kenny thing. And no, I didn't give him a chance. But here's the best part of that story. Right before we get married, Kenny flies through town. He calls me. He go, and we're talking. I hadn't seen him in about 3 or 4 years. He said, man, what's up? I said, man, you ain't gonna believe this. I'm getting married. He said, who are you marrying? I said, remember that girl we went out? He thought the one I went with. I said, no, the one you were with. He went, what? Hung up. I haven't talked to Kenny since 1982. But the reason I tell you that story, and we happily married, hey, you look.
You gotta do what you gotta do.
You gotta do what you gotta do. You understand? So
this is real talk right here. This is real talk right here.
Hey, you got to do what you got to do. And the reason I tell y'all that story, my wife, I knew my worth. When I started my business, I knew my worth. But I'm gonna tell you something. The reason I love telling that story to young people, because I'm telling you something, when you find and you get that right person, there's nothing you can't do. But my wife has built my worth up. She made me feel worthy. In 1992, I had a nervous breakdown from dealing with a childhood trauma. I won't get into that because I don't want to trigger anybody. But my wife ran to me, not from me. And that's when you realize your worth. When somebody, your friend or somebody, when they will run to you when you need them, when you will run to them when they need you, that's when you know I am worthy. And because of what happened to me as a child, it really messed up my self-esteem and all kind of stuff, but I always faked it well and wore that mask. It wasn't until recently, because I finally got a trauma therapist in 2021 and did cognitive behavioral therapy, and I got deep into the trauma. I finally dealt with that. I hiked Mount Kilimanjaro in 2023 to push myself and test myself. But I did all these things, and it finally hit me about a month or so ago, because I've been feeling different in a good way. And I finally realized who I am is enough.
Okay, it's okay, yeah.
I finally realized who I am is enough. So that's, once you realize who you are is enough, your worth will go through the roof, because you know you are worthy. You are worth something. You matter. And for all you young men out there, you use your number. If you play sports, you tell that young lady, I'm number 12 in your program, but number 1 in your heart.
That's the sound bite. Mic drop right there. That's awesome. Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, that's how we taught in 1972.
Yeah. So Janina, Cassandra, any thoughts just on worth? How you determine it? Is it overthink? Anything like that? Anything.
I'll give another perspective other than Mr. Moody is I would say when you look in as far as corporate America, I'll give an example. I think, someone always told me, it's kind of like your bank account. You got to build up your credits before you can make a withdrawal.
Okay.
And then you also have to put in that time and prove yourself, or I didn't even want to say prove yourself, but have that impact, showcase the value you bring and whatnot. And I'll go back to when I was at Visa. I just had a really, really great experience. I, was just really great outcomes and so forth. But to Mr. Moody's perspective, it's when I was working at Visa that when I was traveling abroad, I kept getting a call from Google. And Google kept calling and calling, and I kept avoiding the calls until I had like a 3-hour layover in Hong Kong. And I was like, what the heck? Let me take the call. And so they were like, hey, Cassandra, there's a role we think you'll be right for it. And I was like, no, I'm okay. I'm happy with my role, happy with my, the position and so forth. And they were like, can you just talk to our COO? They just want to talk to you and so forth. And I was like, me being from the South, I was like, let me pick the worst time that someone would want to talk to someone. And so I was like, fine, I am free on Sunday at 2:00. I figured they'd be eating and they wouldn't want to talk to me. But lo and behold, she wanted to talk. I was like, damn, now I got to talk to her. And so what started off as we thought just a 30-minute quick conversation really turned into like an hour or two conversation. And what we talked about was not work. It was not what the role was. It was her as a leader and me as a leader. And most importantly, we spent most of the time just talking about our kids and our family. And then at the end of it, she was like, hey, would you mind just coming to visit us in California? And I was like, oh, so nothing to lose, so let me go visit and so forth. So then I, flew in, got to meet with the SVP who at Google's kind of upside down. It's really like a president role, right? So met with him as well. And they offered me the role. And what was interesting is, this goes back to Moody not being number 12, but number 1 in Google's heart, I like to say at that time. It was like when they offered it, they made it seem like, hey, this is a great offer. But then I went and I really knew my worth, because being a female person of color in a technical field, and at the time I was an SVP, is not many around. And I knew that. And so I felt so comfortable and confident telling the executive recruiter, look, I know I'm a black unicorn, and I'm okay with that. And I'm okay with my current role. So I was like, this is what I need for me and my family. And we had this conversation, and basically it was able to work out. It was a really, really, it was a right thing for my family, not for me personally, but my family. And this goes back to knowing your worth. I remember when I finally told the president I reported to I was taking this role. Next thing I know, my assistant called. He's like, Sarna, Al wants to talk to you. And I was like, Al? And it was the CEO, Al Kelly, of Visa called. He's like, Sarna, let's talk. And so he said, hey, I know you're taking this role with Google. Google's a great company. And he was like, let me ask you this. Why are you taking a role? And I was like, you know what? The role is great, but it's because I think it's the right role, the right company for me and my family at this time. And he was like, that's all I needed to hear. You need to go. And he said, hey, but by any chance, if you're not happy there, if it's not what you thought, call me, because we would love to have you back at Visa.
Wow.
And I think that shows, to your point, your worth. It doesn't have to be any title. It doesn't have to be anything. Because I've told some of my team members, I'm sure Janine and Moody have, we've encouraged them to take on new opportunities. But for those amazing team members who are more than team members, they are so critical and value added. I've also said, if it doesn't work out, please call me and come back. So that's one way I look at how I assess what my worth is.
Yeah. I want to give everybody just a round of applause. Thank you so much again to everybody. Yeah.